So thank you for staying with me during the break. I'm going to set the alarm again so we can have we are time-wise being warned about the fact that the time is over. So we were talking about textual criticism of the Bible. We touched on the fact that there are a number of manuscripts. We know that they were copied in a very specific, very strict way. How come so many copies are lost? Because they were copying it all the time. And later on, in many of the monasteries, the monks were doing the same thing. The problem with monks is that some of them did not know Hebrew or didn't know Greek, and so they were copying something. They had no clue of what they were doing. And of course, a little change in form would give you another letter or another explanation, other word. The other thing is that when you have copies, the enemy can attack you on the copies. And that's what happened. So enemies of the Jewish, the anti-Jewish enemies, there we have a problem with some of the, one specific Christian church, or a church that calls themselves Christian, and they were organizing things that were not really good for the Jews. And the other thing they did was destroying. For example, they went to Jerusalem and they destroyed the remnants of the temple. They took it away. That's why there's only one wall left, because Christians made sure that Muslims could build the mosques up there. Very, very sad history. But Christians also destroyed Old Testament material, but also New Testament material, because many of them, like I said, they couldn't read, they didn't understand, they didn't know. When Tischendorf went to a cloister or a monastery, he found out that the people were firing the fire with manuscripts. How bad, how sad. I mean, those things are invaluable. You cannot quote the value of it. And they were throwing it away. They were burning it. Just out of ignorance. Because if you had people who knew the value of those materials, many more materials would have survived. Luckily, we have, for the New Testament, we have more than 5,300 manuscripts left. So we can compare. We have a whole range of what we call translations. Translations are the ones who are done in the early years of Christianity. That is, in the beginning of the church, when the church moved on to another place where they did not speak Greek or Hebrew or any of the languages that were close to it, like Aramaic, then they had to translate the materials. And so we have the West Goths, they were translating, and we have a whole range of other groups. And of course we have these people from Rome who had as first language Latin, so they were translating into Latin. That is, by the way, that is not an original language from the Bible. There are only 3 original languages, which are Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek only the Koine Greek. Like I said, there were less changes in the Old Testament than in the New Testament, and we can say that the Old Testament is like 95% accurate always. So it's not that we make it 95%. No, it's 95% always accurate. There's only a small percentage that makes mistakes. And of course, when you make a mistake someday and someone is copying, so they can copy the mistakes. So it stays 95%. And that's a good idea. And another thing we had the privilege of visiting the area around the Dead Sea. That's where in the 40s of last century they found a whole range of old books, old scrolls. When they started dating the scrolls, they found out that the scrolls were actually from around the time of Jesus, from around the time of the apostles, and even earlier. They went as far back as the 2nd century before Christ. Of course, not all of them. And that was very strange, because normally you have, when you have a find, most of the time they are all related or they are all from the same time. But in this case, they were not. So there was someone long time ago already bringing materials together, and then when something happened, and that's most probably when the Romans came in the 60s and 70s of the 1st century, they were hiding. They hid their scrolls, and they were completely gone for almost 1900 years, and then they were found again. And so now we have a time capsule pushing us back 1900 years in language, in linguistical terms. So what teaches us this? Well, of course you can go back to what happened. What were the books? What was the text we found? For example, we found the whole scroll of the book of Isaiah, and you can still find it. I mean, you can still go to Jerusalem today, and you can visit that museum with the scroll, Museum of the Scroll. That's what it's called. That one is 2,000 years old, almost 2,000 years old. Is almost exact, like it's not 95%, okay? It's most probably 99% is accurately translated as we know it. If you translate it from that text or you translate it from the text we have, there's almost no difference. When you go back to the text itself, you say, oh, what a wonderful thing we found. Yes, what a wonderful thing we found. We found almost all biblical books of the Old Testament. All of them were there. Although the text itself, the youngest text, were written after Christ, even after his death and resurrection. So that's the time of the church, but it had nothing to do with the church, because it was a totally different group. It was not one of the sects of Judaism. Remember, we had a number. We had the Essenes, we had the Pharisees, we had the Sadducees, we had the Zealots. But seemingly the people in Masada were different people. Maybe they were Essenes or a group, a splinter group of it. We don't know. Anyway, what we have is those people are fighting the Romans, and before the Romans could capture them, they all decided to suicide and so they all killed themselves, or they killed each other until only one mother and 2 children were left. And when the Romans, after so many months of trying to capture Masada, then they succeeded, and the whole area was empty, except for 900 dead bodies. In the time of the Old Testament, or in the Jewish tradition, you have a number of people who were typically were specialized in translating and in copying, and those were called the Masoretes. And those Masoretes, in the 8th and the 9th century, that is now 11 and 1200 years ago, and that's why we can look and check the different translations with the books we found in on the Dead Sea. So that is a time of 900 years. So we see them and we find out that they are very accurate. And we compare them with today, what we found in the meanwhile, and it's absolutely accurate. So the issue with the Hebrew is kind of easy in the sense that we don't have so much of a problem. In the New Testament, we have a different story. What we have is a number of books. Let me see again here. Yeah, one of the systems they were using, the Jews, when they were copying, they were using a numerical system. So they were counting the letters in a sentence. They counted the letter in a certain page, and if it was wrong, they just you can forget it, because it's not the word of God anymore, because there's an error in there. So that's what he did. In Aleppo is part of Syria and was in the news for a very long time because of the war in Syria in the 10th and in the 11th century. That's the oldest manuscript of the Masoretic tradition known, and the person in charge at that time was Ben Asher, and so the text is called, according to his name, Ben Asher text. It was partially destroyed in 1948 when it was destroyed in a fire. But before it was destroyed, they had taken photographs of it. So we can still go back to the Aleppo Codex. That's what we call it, and there we have still the text completely available. Another codex you have, that is the codex, and let me try to read it. It's the Leningradiensis from Leningrad, and it's also from the 10th and the 11th century. It contains the whole Old Testament, but also contains texts from the minority Masoretic tradition. The writing was done, or the copying was done, in Babylon. In Cairo, that's Egypt, in Geniza, was a ancient storeroom of thousands of Hebrew manuscripts, but most of are just scrap. But it's probably the largest collection in the world. So that's in Cairo. And you may say, why Cairo and why the Hebrew text? When Jesus was born and afterwards his family went away out of Israel, where did they go to? Yes, they go to Egypt. Where did the Israelites come from when they entered Canaan? Where they came from was, Egypt. Where was the largest contingent of Jews living outside of Israel? Egypt. It's similar to what we have today with the United States. There are more Jews living in the U.S. than there are people living in Israel. So Jews have a tendency of the diaspora all the time. They went in diaspora a long time ago. And a whole range of things were actually done in Egypt. For example, the translating of the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek, the Septuaginta. Strangely, that's a Greek word for a Hebrew text. But anyway, so it's that's been done in Egypt, according to history. So the link with Egypt is like it's almost always there. Speaking about the Greek Old Testament, remember it was written or was done in and around 150 BC, but you have also a whole range of manuscripts, copies, and they differ again a little bit, and seemingly that has to do with the Greek language. The Greek language has this advantage of having a lot of words. You can almost say too many words. So they can describe something very accurately because they have a word for it. In my language, when we have a given and something is added, we do the same thing with the word. For example, in other languages, like in English, you have a word for every type of chest or cupboard or drawer, or in Flemish you don't. Everything is kast. It means you have a kitchen kast, keukenkast. You have a living room kast, which is a dressoir. Another word that's being borrowed from French. And then you have the highs and the lows, and it's always kast. It's so the way to explain things are better done in giving every word a specific meaning. But that's even more difficult for the ones who are going to learn the language. And that is an advantage for those who can speak the language, because they know, they feel, in Germany they say the Fingerspitzengefühl. It's in your fingers, you feel the difference. And that is with language exactly the same thing. So you have other discrepancies in different editions of Septuaginta. Then you have, for example, the Samaritan Pentateuch, which was done around the 5th century, probably close to 400 BC. It's, of course, in a language it's very similar to Hebrew, but it's not exactly the same. And then you have the Aramaic, what they call the Aramaic Targums, which are paraphrased translations of the Old Testament. Most of them were written around the year 200. That is, in the year 200 as we know, that's after Christ. Those are things that are available to each and every one of us. Okay, let's look at some families of manuscripts, because we have. It's always interesting to seek and to look for, when you have a manuscript, where does it fit in? Where does it come from? Because in some cases, we know certain things went wrong, and then we can look for those errors or mistakes in the text, and we do not have to repeat them, so we can do something about it. So you have a number of what we call families of manuscripts. One is a strict Masoretic, which is basically that of the Aleppo Codex and rabbinical Bibles. And then you have the Proto-Masoretic, and it contains patterns of variants from before the Masoretic era, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls and some of the versions and non-Masoretic Hebrew manuscripts. The Masoretes were not the only ones, and the Masoretes were very strict. So you have a strict group, you have a little less strict group, and then you had people who wrote and copied before, and then you have people who wrote or copied afterwards. And so you have different types of different families of manuscripts in that sense. So you have the Proto-Septuagint, that's before the Septuagint. You have the Proto-Samaritan family. Like I said, the Samaritan Pentateuch was a kind of Hebrew translation or kind of Hebrew version. The Proto-Septuagint, you feel the difficulty there with the language. Of course, it is a translation, but it's still a manuscript because it can be more than 2,000 years old. And when you find something that is 2,000 years old, yep, you hit the jackpot. This is important, absolutely important, certainly when it's a biblical text. So both of them are available. But remember, time-wise, it's different. The pre or the Proto-Samaritan text was the 5th century before Christ. The Proto-Septuagint was from 150 before Christ. So later, when the numbers are higher in years, because in BC, the longer it's been taken, the older it is, the higher the number of years is. So we had before manuscripts, we had versions, we have families of manuscripts, and we have quotations. Of course, you have quotes everywhere. You can have a quote on a piece of pottery. You can have a quote on a lemmet of a sword You can have a quote on the wall of a temple. You can have all kinds of quotes. So you have that type of quotes, and you have also quotes in other literature. For example, in other books that being read and read at that time. And so they're quoting as the same thing we still do. You have a whole range of books which we call Christian literature. Some of them they have been writing the text with an open Bible, but not using the Bible. Some of them have with an open Bible and quoting the Bible all the time. So there's a lot of difference. And so you have, even in the old, in the antique time, you still had a whole range of quotations. Of course, the early church fathers were other people who quoted. Like one of the issues I mentioned before, that you have this all of the quotations of the church fathers. They all include the whole of the New Testament. So we have, from the books of the New Testament, all of them are quoted by the church fathers, and that is that's inside the Christian church. So, and it's still going on. Of course, they are in Greek, they are in Latin, they are in Aramaic, and later on they are in other languages. So that is, again, for us, interesting to have these quotes. Ancient Jewish non-Christian writings are full of quotations from the Old Testament. Well, of course, they are not quoting the New Testament. But Josephus, the historian at the imperial court in Rome, he was a Jew himself, he predicted the fall of Rome, and he predicted the one who was going to win the war, and that man won the war, and so on. So next to Josephus, you have a whole range of materials from Philo, the Mishnah, you have the Talmuds, you have the Tosefta, and so on. And lastly, there are some brief quotations on coins, pottery, amulets, and the like. So there's a whole range of things we cannot touch, because I can show it to you. There's a small problem here now, what we have with the projection. Normally I have things projected behind me, but the camera is not able to pick the text, and so what we are going to do is we're going to make it possible for you to have the PowerPoint presentation. That's again freely available. You just give me your email address and I send you the PowerPoint, and so on. Okay, that is not just for this course, that is in general for all the courses. That's how we work. You can have whatever we have. We don't have it for ourselves. We share it with others. That's why we teach. That's why we open our Bibles. That's why we open our hearts to you, and we hope that you will be blessed. Next to all those things, the families, the quotations, you have principles. Certain variations in certain variations in text are unintentional. Somebody made a mistake, and like I said, when you make a mistake and the next group or next person will copy it, he's copying the mistake. That is he doesn't have the intention to change the word. He doesn't have the intention to change the Bible. Doesn't have the intention to change the word of God. That's nothing, but it happened. Or in some cases, you have a text, and part of the text is being ruined or destroyed by certain things like fire, or like cutting, or like a drink being spilled on it, and so on. So those are also different things. But all of them count for only 1, maximum 2% of the changes. One issue you have to be aware of that is the fact that since we have that type of manuscripts, like I said, thousands and thousands of manuscripts, you have to what we call collate, bringing together a text. That is what Erasmus did in the 16th century. That is what the people have to do again and again, because Erasmus was only working in one line, only the Byzantine text. And now we have more texts available, many more than ever before. So we need to have a recollection. We have to collect it again to bring back the text. And that's why you have differences in translations. Even in translations like, for example, the NIV. NIV is taking on board new findings, and they will change in their text the text of the printed Bibles. The same thing happened to the King James. Some people think the King James is the only version that is worth reading, but which one? When you go to the 1611 version, that is something people say to me, oh, you have the 1611 version. Yeah, do you know the 1611 version? Do you know what's in there? All the apocryph books. So when you claim that the 1611 version is the best translation ever, then you have to add the apocryph books, because they are translated by the same people. So, okay, whatever. No problem with this. This is just today we have a lot more translation. We have a lot more of possibilities, and of course, since we have computers. In past times, we always had the problem of making a text available in a certain language, and then when you go to the next village or the next province, you have to redo everything again. Not anymore today. Today you have lines of languages which you can find that certain words are being used and reused in other languages, slightly different. You find the system, you add it to the system, you add it to a program, and your translation is being ready in a few years instead of having to work for 20 years. That's how language works. Let me give you an example of this in European languages. Of course, I cannot give you any examples of African languages because my understanding is way too limited to do so. But for example, in English you have the word place. In French, place. In Flemish, plaats. In Spanish, plaza. In Italian, piazza. So you hear all the same word, except it's a little bit different. So that is how translation works. The same goes with father. Father in English, Vater in German, Vader in Flemish. So you see the languages are interlinked, and when you know how to deal with it, to change the wording by just adding or taking away some letters, so you can work very fast in a new translation. So that's why, according to Wycliffe Bible translators, that is one of the biggest advantages we found in the 20th century. I think that most of the translations of the Bibles are being done in the 20th century. Because Wycliffe Bible translators were founded in the 20th century, and they work with I don't know exactly how many, but I think they have 5,000 people working on the field. I'm not saying that all of them are doing translation work, but at least a lot of them are doing it. So that is slight translation problem, slight differences, and when you go back, when you know those things, then you can understand more about the collation of text. So scholars then consult manuscript and collations, not just manuscript itself, but also the collations, because they know that other people were working on that very, very, very long time. And I think that is important for us to see that a translation is not done by yourself. A translation is done by a whole range of people, and some are doing this and some are doing that, and other ones are doing this, and finally you have someone on a printing press printing it, because that's all these things are preparations to have a printed copy, and then to present it to the world, to the church, and to new believers. So scholars consult both manuscripts and collations, but also versions, quotations, and that's important. Masoretic notes made by the Masoretes. It's always good to look back into history to find out how did people do the same thing as what you were doing, but say 800 years ago. Of course, they had no computer, but they had a lot of head knowledge, much more than we have today. On another problem we find is translations. When you all the translations or ancient versions are tricky. What I'm saying is that the quality of translating is not always as good as it should have been. But of course, I mean, there's a problem in the sense that you cannot just find always the right person for the translation, and so you have to do with what you have. So there was a problem, and so in the past. One of the problems, of course, is we like with the Masoretes, we have this Masoretes. They were doing it very well, but people around before and after, sometimes they were not doing it in the right way. Not that I'm blaming them, but I'm just saying this is what is really happening. Okay, so we have a whole range of manuscripts here. Let's see, 5,600, that's the New Testament. Let's go back to our Bibles. Okay, let's open our Bibles at Revelations 28. For those who do not know, Revelations is the last book of the Bible. I'm just kidding, of course you know. And in the last verses of the Bible, chapter 22, verses 18, and I'm reading from the NIV, I warn everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this scroll. If anyone adds anything to them, God will add to that person the plagues described in this scroll. If anyone takes words away from the scroll of prophecy, God will take away from that person any share in the tree of life and in the holy city, which is described in this scroll. So that is a very strong biblical argument. But there's another one, and that is a text from the first book of the New Testament, and that is the book of Matthew. Matthew 24. Matthew 24 is one of those long chapters, and you have the following. 24 verse 15. So, when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Let the reader understand. That is you and me. What we have is, we have a text that fits in history, that has strong roots in history. And the Jewish people have strong roots in history, and the church has strong roots in history. And that's why we have so many copies, so many parts, so many letters are being not only written, but copied again and again. And the people of the church were keeping books together from different sources, from Peter, from Paul, from Luke, from John, from Jude, from Mark, from Matthew. That's only the New Testament. But of course, they were also interested, much more interested than we are actually. They were really interested in the Old Testament, especially the first years of the early church. The reason was very simple. Many of them were Jews from birth, so they belonged to the Jewish nation, and they could speak and they could read. And everyone, that's a mistake some people make, but everyone in the Jewish nation, in the Jewish religion actually, even today, when you are 12 years old, you have to do your bar mitzvah. You have to read a text from the Bible in the Hebrew language. So you have to know Hebrew, and you have to know how to read it. And of course there are some who learn it by heart, and so but they're still, I'm not saying they don't know what they are saying, because many of them speak the new Hebrew, the Ivrit, at home. So there's not so much of a difference in writing. There may be a difference in wording. Of course, I mean, every language evolves. That's a strange word that coming from a theologian speaking about evolution, but that's true. There is evolution. Language evolves. Theology evolves. Yeah, we do. So there is evolution in theology. There's evolution in the church. Of course there is. Things are changing. Several hundred years ago, speaking about homosexuality was a no-no. I mean, it was not even people were not even thinking about it. They had set ideas, and nope. When you talk about it today, you have to be very, very careful, because otherwise people will come and say, you said this and that is something you don't do. I mean, you're a homophobe. No, we are not homophobe. We just follow the Bible. We just follow the Bible. That's a problem we are facing today more and more. More and more. In today's Christian societies, especially in Christian churches, in Christian areas, you have this problem of having two layers of people, two different types of people. You have the Christians and you have the non-Christians. And non-Christians are looked down at. Well, that's typical, man, because Jews do the same thing. They call us dogs. Or Islamic people, Muslims, they look down on us. Oh, you don't know anything about Allah. We know too much about Allah. We don't want to have anything to do with Allah. Not with their Allah. Because the Yahweh, the Elohim of the Bible, has nothing to do with Allah. It's not the same one. The Allah of the Islamic people is a different God. When I say different God, I mean that he is a demon. And when he's a demon, not for me. Thank you. So that already will make me Islamophobe for some people. I'm not an Islamophobe. I'm not afraid of Islam. Islam will be judged by God. I don't have to judge Islam. I don't have to judge homosexual people, transgender people. I don't have to, no. Let the gay people be gay. But please use it in the right version, because of the version that was used, let's say 100 years ago. I was gay, I was happy, instead of being homosexual. So, we have a little time over, but I would like to talk to you in the next session about the Greek New Testament. Now we covered a lot of ground, and I think it's important to make sure for yourself that you understood everything. Like I said, there are certain types of criticism, and remember, criticism is not critiquing, but it's actually critical thinking about many things. We talked about form criticism. We talked about genre criticism. This is all about the criticism of the Bible. So it is what we call critical thinking, and in that sense, it's textual criticism that is important to us. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again for the next session. God bless you.